The moment the empath stops saving everyone and chooses peace instead. Peace begins with a smile, Mother Teresa once said, and true peace begins when you finally stop carrying the weight of everyone else's storms. In this video on spiritual wisdom, we'll explore Carl Jung's profound truth about the moment an empath stops saving everyone and instead chooses peace. What would your life look like if you allowed yourself that freedom? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And let's begin this journey of personal growth and happiness together. 1. The origin of the empath's burden. Empathy is often misunderstood as a pure act of kindness or a spiritual blessing. Yet in truth, it is very often born from childhood wounds and unconscious survival strategies. Many empaths did not simply choose to feel deeply. Rather, they were shaped by early environments where emotional turbulence was constant, where safety depended on anticipating the moods of others and absorbing storms that did not belong to them. A child who grows up under the shadow of unmet needs and invisible wounds learns quickly that harmony is maintained only by carrying the weight of everyone else's emotions. What the world later calls compassion began as a defense mechanism, a silent agreement with life. If I carry their pain, perhaps they will not hurt me. Perhaps they will love me. Perhaps I will finally belong. As this pattern repeats, it becomes identity. The empath grows into adulthood, believing that to be valuable is to heal, to soothe, to absorb, and they begin to confuse sacrifice with love. This is the archetypal wound Carl Jung referred to. The moment when survival hardens into destiny and the soul begins to carry what was never meant to be its burden. Spiritual awakening arises when the empath finally recognizes this hidden truth, that their so-called gift is also a wound, that their endless saving of others has come at the expense of their own peace. Awakening does not mean abandoning empathy, but transforming it into something higher. The conscious choice to feel deeply without drowning, to love without losing oneself, to serve without erasing one's own existence. In the modern world, this realization is essential. We live in a time saturated with conflict, projections, and emotional chaos, and the unawakened empath often becomes a sponge for pain, drained of energy, and robbed of clarity. Yet spirituality reminds us that true compassion is never self-destruction. It is the ability to honor others while fiercely protecting one's own inner sanctuary. Saying no is not cruelty, it is wisdom. Guarding your boundaries is not selfishness, it is sacred responsibility. When you cease to mistake carrying wounds for offering love, you unlock healthier connections and discover a peace that radiates outward. Empathy without awareness is bondage, but empathy with awareness is liberation. To choose peace instead of constant rescuing is to step into a higher dimension of love, where your presence itself becomes a source of healing rather than your exhaustion. This is the deeper truth of spiritual awakening. You are not here merely to carry others. You are here to embody balance, to show that the strongest light is the one that refuses to burn itself out. And when the empath finally lays down the burden of survival and embraces the freedom of self-respect, they become not less compassionate, but more powerful. A living reminder that real love is not suffering endlessly. It is shining steadily, wisely, and with dignity. Comment below. I release the burden. If you are ready to honor the origin of your empath's journey and finally choose peace. 2. The archetypal wound and repetition. The empath carries an archetypal wound, a hidden script written deep within the soul, whispering that peace can only be earned by carrying the chaos of others. From childhood, subtle lessons were planted in moments when silence in the home felt heavy, when conflict could only be softened if you dimmed your needs and absorbed the emotions around you. This became survival, and survival slowly became identity. Over time, the pattern repeated itself in relationships, friendships, and every corner of life, as though fate kept setting the same stage until awareness was born. Carl Jung's truth speaks clearly here. What remains unconscious will continue to govern life until it is brought into the light of consciousness. To the empath, this wound may look like kindness, but at its root, it was a strategy to stay safe. You believed your worth was tied to how much pain you could hold, how much peace you could create by sacrificing yourself. Yet spirituality teaches a higher lesson. Peace is not borrowed from others' approval or their storms calming down. Peace is born within you. Awakening begins when you recognize that your soul was never designed to endlessly absorb, but to radiate. This realization feels like breaking an ancient contract that declared you must be the healer, the fixer, the one who bleeds so others may rest. But the moment you see this contract for what it is, you discover the freedom to write a new one that protects your own peace as sacred. Life repeats its lessons until they are learned. If you find yourself in the same exhausting cycles, drained, unappreciated, overshadowed, it is not a punishment, but an invitation to grow. Jung called this the repetition compulsion, the psyche's way of replaying old wounds until you awaken to them. In this moment of recognition, your path of spiritual development begins to shift. True compassion does not mean losing yourself for others. It means including yourself in the circle of care. Protecting your inner calm is not selfish. It is the foundation that allows authentic love to flow. Love that does not come from exhaustion, but from strength and clarity. The lesson is profound. You no longer need to wait for others to change before you allow yourself to breathe. You do not need to measure your serenity by the storms you silence. Your soul is inviting you to end the old story and step into a new one, where your worth is no longer defined by how much you endure, but by the sanctuary you cultivate within. This is the essence of spirituality, to realize that your being was never meant to be a vessel for endless pain, but a dwelling place for wisdom, light, and peace. When you choose to stop saving everyone and begin honoring your own serenity, you break generational cycles and become a living example of what awakening truly looks like. And in doing so, you remind the world of the most powerful truth. Peace is not given. It is created from within. And once you embody it, you give others the courage to find it in themselves. 3. Dreams and symbols of drowning. When you dream of water, drowning, or rescuing someone, it is not just a passing image, but a mirror of your hidden struggles. For the empath, these dreams reveal how easily you become submerged in the emotions of others, mistaking their storms for your own. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The drowning you see in your dreams is your unconscious rising up to tell you that you have been carrying burdens that were never meant for you. And now your soul longs to return to solid ground. Water in dreams is the language of emotion. And drowning shows how deep you have been sinking under the weight of feelings that do not belong to you. You may think it is love or kindness, but often it is a survival pattern, believing that if you rescue others, you will finally feel safe yourself. True compassion, however, does not mean losing yourself. As Anais Nin wrote, "You cannot save people. You can only love them." The dream is your inner intelligence whispering that it is time to protect your spirit instead of constantly throwing yourself into the waves of others. All your life, you may have acted as if you were everyone's lifeboat, but the dream of drowning arrives when your lifeboat begins to sink. This is the soul's warning. You cannot carry everyone forever without sinking yourself. Spiritual wisdom teaches that real intelligence is not about fixing or rescuing, but about knowing when to step back, when to let go, and when to choose peace. Your greatest gift is not sacrifice, but presence. And presence can only shine when it is not clouded by exhaustion or despair. In Jungian psychology, every symbol carries a message, and drowning is the archetype of being overwhelmed. Yet, it also contains the seed of transformation, calling you to rise above the waters and reclaim the ground of clarity and independence. Dry land, in this sense, is peace, boundaries, and self-respect. It is the understanding that choosing peace is not selfish, but sacred. For love without boundaries destroys, while love with boundaries heals. When you honor yourself in this way, you bring others not false rescue, but genuine healing, born from your strength rather than your depletion. So when you dream of drowning, see it as your soul's invitation to ask, whose pain am I carrying and why? The answer frees you to release what was never yours and to return to the calm shore of your own heart. As Rumi wrote, try to accept the changing seasons of your heart, even if you have never been in a season like this before. This season is about awakening, about choosing peace over chaos, and about finally letting go of the storms that do not belong to you. By doing so, you embody the deepest truth Carl Jung left us, that once the unconscious is brought into the light, it no longer controls us, we control it. And in that choice, you discover that your greatest rescue is not saving others, but saving yourself. Comment below, I rise above the waters. If you're ready to let go of the weight of others and embrace your own peace. 4. The savior complex and its collapse. Empaths often confuse saving others with love, but what begins as compassion quietly transforms into exhaustion, resentment, and bitterness. When you believe that carrying the storms of others is your sacred duty, you slowly lose yourself beneath the weight of responsibilities that were never yours to bear. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And this truth reveals that genuine love cannot be born from self-erasure. The savior complex, though rooted in kindness, chains the empath to a cycle of martyrdom where they give endlessly yet remain unseen, hoping that sacrifice will bring connection, but finding instead only emptiness. This collapse of the savior complex is both painful and necessary. For many empaths, their identity was forged in early life, where survival meant attuning to the moods of those around them. They learned to mistake hyper-awareness for kindness and constant giving for intimacy, and over time, this pattern became their unconscious truth. Yet, the longer they cling to this identity, the more disconnected they become from their authentic self. The exhaustion builds, the resentment hardens, and eventually the soul rebels, demanding liberation through individuation. Jung called individuation the process of becoming whole, the journey of reclaiming your true self from the fragments you gave away. When an empath chooses to step out of martyrdom, they begin to understand that true love is not sacrificing yourself endlessly, but standing fully present as who you are. The fear that comes with letting go is real. Many empaths feel that if they stop saving others, they will no longer be needed, and without being needed, they will vanish. But what truly disappears is not their worth, but the illusion that their worth depends on the chaos of others. This is not abandonment, it is freedom. The collapse of the savior role tears down the false walls that trap them and allows fresh air to enter. In spirituality, collapse is not the end, but the beginning of awakening, because only when the old self dissolves can the authentic self rise. To stop rescuing is to create space where others can confront their own darkness, and in doing so, the empath finally discovers peace. Modern life often makes this lesson more difficult. We live in a culture that glorifies overwork, self-sacrifice, and constant availability, turning burnout into a badge of honor. Empaths in this world are praised for their endless giving, but beneath the applause lies depletion and despair. Spiritual awakening asks them to rewrite this story. Choosing peace over exhaustion is not selfish. It is sacred. To honor your own boundaries, to protect your energy, to rest without guilt, these are acts of profound love. When you stop measuring your value by what you give away and begin honoring who you are, you embody a deeper form of compassion, one that uplifts without destroying. Carl Jung reminded us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. For the empath, this means shining light on the hidden belief that identity is tied to saving. By exposing this belief, they step into freedom, no longer bound to play the role of the eternal caretaker. This transformation is not about withdrawing from love, but about rediscovering it in its purest form. Love without depletion, connection without chains, compassion without erasure. Through individuation, the empath learns to show up whole, vibrant, and authentic, no longer defined by wounds, but by wisdom. And when they stop saving and start simply being, they discover that peace itself is the greatest gift they can offer both to themselves and to the world. 5. Choosing peace feels like betrayal. Choosing peace often feels like betrayal because for so long you have been conditioned to believe that your love, identity, and sense of belonging are tied to how much you sacrifice for others. Walking away from this pattern feels terrifying, as though you are abandoning everything that once defined you. But in truth, you are leaving behind illusions built on childhood wounds and ancestral contracts of silence and self-denial. Many empaths grew up as the child who kept the peace in a house filled with storms, carrying burdens that were never theirs to hold. And as adults, they continue to absorb chaos, believing that this is what love requires. These inherited agreements are not only personal, but generational, formed by ancestors who endured suffering without release. Yet when you finally break them, you are not betraying those who came before you. You are honoring them by ending cycles they never had the chance to end. As Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And choosing peace is precisely that, a step into authenticity rather than remaining a mirror for everyone else's shadows. The guilt you feel in choosing yourself is nothing more than the voice of old conditioning echoing in your heart, urging you to return to roles that no longer serve your spiritual development. When you say no to carrying the weight of others, you are saying yes to your own healing. And in healing yourself, you also liberate those tied to your lineage. It is as if an invisible chain is broken. Each link release sets free not only your soul, but also the memory of ancestors who lived in silence. Spirituality teaches that peace is not selfish, but sacred. And by embracing it, you create a space where love flows freely without the chains of obligation. This is not withdrawal, but transformation. A movement from sacrifice that drains you to a presence that inspires others. True spiritual development is not found in endlessly absorbing pain, but in protecting the divine gift of your own energy, in standing firm within boundaries that affirm your worth. The fear of losing love when you stop over-sacrificing is an illusion. For those meant to walk beside you will love you more deeply when they see you rooted in your authentic self. Those who valued you only for your willingness to suffer will drift away. And that is not betrayal, it is freedom. Choosing peace becomes the moment where compassion and self-respect meet, where you step out of ancestral patterns into a new possibility of living. You no longer confuse sacrifice with love, nor guilt with belonging, for you finally see that peace is not the end of love, but the beginning of true love. To walk this path is to become a living example of what spiritual awakening truly means, proving that honoring yourself honors all who came before you, and that liberation is the greatest gift you can pass on to those who come after. Leave your likes and subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights like this. Comment below, "I choose peace without guilt," to affirm your journey toward inner freedom. 6. Death and resurrection of identity. Choosing peace as an empath is not simply a decision, but a transformation that feels like the death of an old self and the birth of the authentic one. Because for so long, you have carried the weight of others' storms, mistaking them for your own, believing that love meant saving, healing, and rescuing everyone around you. Yet as Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And to do so, you must let go of the savior identity that was never truly yours, but a mask shaped by others' needs and wounds. At first, this release feels like a crucifixion, the painful dismantling of a self that lived for approval and validation. And those closest to you may resist, calling you selfish, cold, or unloving. Not because you are wrong, but because they do not yet understand the strength and boundaries and the sacredness of inner stillness. The moment you refuse to rescue everyone, the world reacts, because your absence forces others to confront their own shadows. And while this resistance feels like rejection, it is really proof that you are stepping out of an old cycle into a higher truth. Just as Rumi reminded us that try to accept the changing seasons of your soul, even when you feel stripped bare, for the garden is already being prepared for spring. This stripping away is the death of the savior role, and though it hurts, it clears the ground for resurrection, where you discover within yourself a quiet, steady center untouched by chaos. In this resurrection, you learn that peace is not selfish, but sacred, and that your truest love is not in endlessly absorbing pain, but in embodying balance, clarity, and presence. From this new center, you stop confusing chaos with intimacy and sacrifice with love, realizing that real love honors boundaries and thrives in mutual growth. You see that energy is not an endless resource for others to consume, but a divine gift meant to be protected and directed with intelligence and spiritual wisdom. And in choosing peace, you no longer drown in storms that are not yours, but instead carry still waters within you, waters that reflect truth rather than absorb turmoil. Jung's words echo here. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And by making the unconscious savior pattern conscious, you finally step into individuation, the process of becoming whole. This wholeness feels like a resurrection of identity, where you are no longer a mirror for others' wounds, but a vessel of light grounded in authenticity, where you can step back without guilt, love without rescuing, and hold space without losing yourself. In that sacred freedom, you learn that peace is not passive, it is power, it is clarity, and it is strength. Choosing peace is not the end of love. It is the rebirth of true love, a love that begins with yourself and radiates outward, teaching others by example that real connection is born not from sacrifice, but from wholeness. And in embracing this truth, you claim your most courageous gift, the right to live as your authentic self, awake, whole, and free. 7. Facing guilt and shadow work. Guilt is often the invisible chain that keeps the empath locked in cycles of overgiving, making them believe that love must be earned through sacrifice and constant selflessness. Fear of abandonment whispers that if they stop pouring out, they will be left behind, while the deep hunger to be loved drives them to give more than they have. Yet when these shadows are brought to light, a powerful truth emerges. Much of the giving was never born of pure compassion, but rooted in old wounds where survival once depended on pleasing others. Carl Jung's insight that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, reveals why so many empaths unknowingly repeat the same painful patterns, mistaking slavery to others' needs as love. Shadow work is the key to breaking this cycle, because only by facing the guilt, the fear, and the desperate need for acceptance can the empath recognize that their so-called kindness was often a survival strategy. Spirituality and spiritual awakening demand this courage, the willingness to look inward and admit that empathy chained to wounds is not strength, but servitude. Healing begins when the empath learns that love does not have to be earned by carrying the burdens of others, that saying no does not mean rejection, and that resting does not equal abandonment. Slowly, empathy transforms into something purer, an energy no longer manipulated by fear, but guided by strength, clarity, and wisdom. In daily life, this transformation means no longer rescuing others from the lessons their soul must learn, refusing to apologize for boundaries, and choosing peace even when guilt tries to pull you back. The empath's heart remains soft, but it is no longer exploited. It becomes discerning, powerful, and free. This is the moment when empathy shifts from slavery into sovereignty, when giving is no longer a desperate attempt to secure love, but a conscious act of freedom born from authenticity. Spiritual wisdom teaches that peace is the highest gift the empath can claim, because from peace comes true love, love that does not drain but uplifts, love that is not chained to wounds but rooted in wholeness. And it is here, in this sacred balance, that empathy finally becomes strength. Stay connected with our community of spiritual wisdom by subscribing to our channel. Here, we explore Carl Jung's truths and the path of spiritual awakening, helping you transform guilt into growth and shadow into light. Remember, you are worthy of peace, healing, and the deeper freedom your soul has always longed for. 8. Individuation and true love. Peace is not isolation, but integration. The art of loving fully without ever losing yourself in the process. For so long, many empaths have mistaken endless sacrifice for compassion, carrying the storms of others as if it were their destiny. Yet true spirituality and spiritual development reveal a deeper truth. Love does not demand you to vanish into someone else's chaos. It asks you to stand rooted in your own essence while offering warmth and presence. This is where the empath's journey transforms, shifting from compulsive rescuing into conscious, free giving that arises not from fear or obligation, but from authenticity and choice. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And for the empath, this means realizing that worth is not measured by how much you save others, but by how truthfully you embody your own wholeness. When this realization takes hold, boundaries cease to be heavy walls of defense and instead become sacred doorways, passages that allow connection without collapse. They protect not to imprison, but to honor both your space and the sacredness of the relationship. You begin to see that real love is not about dissolving into another person's needs, but about standing firmly in your own light, creating harmony instead of exhaustion. Spiritual awakening teaches you that when you abandon yourself for others, the love you give becomes tainted with depletion. But when you honor yourself, your giving flows with freedom and joy. In the noise of modern life, people often confuse attachment with love and sacrifice with loyalty. But these distortions only drain the soul. To love without boundaries is to empty the very well from which love flows, leaving nothing pure to offer. To love with integration is to give without breaking, to serve without resentment, and to walk beside others without losing your own path. It is the realization that your presence itself, aligned with your authentic self, heals more than endless rescuing ever could. The empath's evolution is not about rejecting love, but about refining it, choosing peace that does not abandon connection, but deepens it. It is here that spirituality whispers the essential lesson. Boundaries are not selfish. They are sacred. They create the space where love, respect, and growth can thrive, where you can embrace others wholeheartedly while still remaining whole. This is the true alchemy of spiritual development, where peace becomes harmony, love becomes balance, and the empath finally discovers that the greatest gift they can give is not their constant saving, but their unwavering authenticity. 9. Transformation of relationships. The empath no longer looks at others as projects to fix, but as sacred mysteries to honor. Because love is not measured by how much pain you can absorb, but by how deeply you can respect the unique journey of another soul. For too long, you may have believed that kindness meant carrying burdens that were never yours. Yet Carl Jung reminds us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And in that truth, you see that compassion is not control, and sacrifice without end is not love. True intelligence, spiritual wisdom, teaches you that every person has their own wounds, their own timing, and their own lessons. And by stepping back, you give them the dignity of becoming whole in their own way. In solitude, the empath discovers a new kind of companionship, the voice of the soul itself, the inner center Jung called individuation. Solitude is not emptiness, but fullness, not loneliness, but communion. And in the silence, you begin to hear your own heartbeat again. The divine center whispers what the world's noise drowned out, that peace is not selfish, but sacred, that to reclaim your stillness is to reclaim your life. As Rumi said, listen to silence. It has so much to say. In that quiet, you finally feel the alignment between your conscious self and your hidden depths. And from that harmony comes clarity, direction, and strength. When the empath begins to live from this wholeness, love transforms into something purer, freer, and more expansive. It is no longer desperate or draining, but flows like a river that cannot be contained. Generous because it springs from abundance. Liberating because it releases others from expectation. Unbound because it recognizes that no soul belongs to you. Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And in choosing peace over the compulsion to rescue, you make that hidden wound visible, breaking the old cycle and stepping into freedom. Love now shines as light rather than weighs as burden. And relationships shift from patterns of depletion to spaces of mutual growth. You are no longer the savior, but a whole being walking in dignity, able to give without losing yourself, and to stand beside others without carrying them. This is the essence of intelligent spiritual wisdom. Love that empowers instead of drains, presence that heals instead of controls, peace that radiates instead of pleads. And in this transformation, you find the most profound truth, that by choosing peace, you do not abandon love, you perfect it. If you're still with us on this journey of transformation, comment below. I'm ready for peaceful relationships. Your words help us grow together in wisdom and connection. 10. The archetype of the healed healer. The empath dies, and the sage is born, because the journey of the soul is never about remaining in endless sacrifice, but about transforming into wholeness. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And this truth lies at the core of spiritual awakening. Healing does not flow from exhaustion, but from integration, not from constantly absorbing the pain of others, but from embodying peace, intelligence, and spiritual wisdom. Wholeness radiates more healing power than any form of self-destruction. And when you live from a place of divine union, you bring a kind of love to the world that is not heavy with wounds, but luminous with presence. For so long, the empath has lived like a candle burning itself down, mistaking depletion for virtue and sacrifice for compassion. Yet true compassion does not destroy the self, it nourishes both giver and receiver. The sage realizes that peace is not the absence of love, but love purified, love stripped of its distortions, love reborn in clarity. This is why choosing peace is not withdrawal, but the most sacred act of care. In spirituality, boundaries are not walls. They are gardens that protect what is holy, spaces that allow relationships to flourish in authenticity rather than codependency. If you pour yourself out endlessly, you leave nothing for your own soul. But if you stand rooted and whole, you teach others the deeper lesson, that they too must rise into their own strength. The healed healer is not indifferent, but present in a higher way. Instead of rushing to stop every storm, they become the stillness that reminds others of their own resilience. Their strength is quiet yet unshakable. Their love is not smothering, but liberating. This is the great paradox Carl Jung hinted at, that integrating both shadow and light makes you more powerful than carrying only wounds ever could. The sage embodies a spirituality that uplifts without depletion, inspires without demanding, heals without sacrificing identity. They know that presence itself, when anchored in wholeness, transforms more deeply than endless acts of martyrdom. In modern life, where constant demands and emotional noise threaten to scatter your energy, this wisdom becomes essential. You may feel drained by relationships, careers, or even family roles that take more than they give. Yet the truth remains: peace is not selfish. It is necessary. Choosing peace means choosing to protect love in its purest form. It means allowing your life to be guided not by the compulsion to rescue, but by the wisdom to live whole and free. As Rumi wrote, "Try to accept the changing seasons of your heart, even if they seem bitter. For one day you will see that they make way for new gardens." That garden is your healed self, a space where your presence itself becomes medicine, not through sacrifice, but through radiance. The empath dies, and the sage is born, and in that rebirth, you step into your truest calling, to embody peace so deeply that others remember their own. This is not the end of love, but its highest expression. A love that flows from wholeness. A love that is no longer chained to suffering, but liberated in divine union. A love that heals not by breaking you down, but by making you whole. And so, dear friends, the moment the empath chooses peace over constant saving is the moment they finally step into their true power. If this message spoke to your heart, let it remind you that peace is not selfish, it is sacred. Thank you for watching. The moment the empath stops saving everyone and chooses peace. Instead, Carl Jung's truth here on Spiritual Wisdom. If you found value in today's video, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear this truth, and don't forget to subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos filled with insight and transformation. Until next time, may you walk in peace and wisdom. 7 unmistakable signs you've survived your soul's greatest battle. Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars. These timeless words by Khalil Gibran remind us that our deepest struggles often shape our greatest strength. In today's video on Spiritual Wisdom, we'll explore the 7 unmistakable signs that you've survived your soul's greatest battle. A journey that even Carl Jung would say marks the triumph of individuation and inner growth. As you listen, I invite you to reflect on your own path. Which of these signs resonate most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your story might be the very light someone else needs today. 1. Comfort in solitude. Solitude is no longer the heavy sentence it once appeared to be. It becomes a sanctuary, a space where your soul can breathe freely. What once felt like exile now transforms into a sacred retreat where you meet the deepest parts of yourself without fear. In that stillness, you no longer chase after validation or distraction, for you understand that quiet is not emptiness, but creation in its purest form. The silence that used to frighten you now births clarity, creativity, and peace. It is here, in the gentle rhythm of your own company, that you find the strength which cannot be shaken by the world outside. When you have survived your soul's greatest battle, you no longer fear being alone, because solitude reveals itself as an ally rather than an enemy. The noise of the crowd loses its power over you, and the endless pull of society's approval fades into the background. You have tasted the still waters of your own being, and now you carry within you a quiet confidence that does not need to be advertised. This is the shift from seeking to becoming, from clinging to discovering, and it marks the birth of true intelligence, an intelligence rooted not only in the mind, but in spiritual wisdom. Others begin to sense this change, even when they cannot name it. They notice your calm presence in the midst of their restless searching. While they scrambled to escape their own silence with noise, distraction, and endless activity, you remain steady, centered, unshaken. Your energy whispers of survival, of depth, of a battle fought and won within the unseen chambers of the heart. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the path to becoming who you are meant to be, and in solitude, you have found this path. By embracing the silence that once haunted you, you step into a maturity that no external recognition could ever provide. This shift is not common, for many people are terrified of silence. They fill it with chatter, entertainment, or endless scrolling, afraid of what the quiet will reveal. But you, having crossed the threshold of your own suffering, no longer fear the reflection that rises in stillness. You have faced your shadows, endured their weight, and emerged with a light that shines without effort. Solitude has taught you to listen first to your own voice, then to the subtler currents of life itself. In this listening, you discover not loneliness, but communion, not emptiness, but infinite possibility. The beauty of this transformation is that it does not remove you from the world. It prepares you to return to it with clearer vision and deeper strength. Silence equips you with the wisdom to discern, to create, to love without attachment, and to act without fear. People may not understand why they are drawn to you, but they feel the steadiness you carry. It is not loud, it does not demand attention, yet it speaks louder than words. This is the quiet triumph of a soul that has walked through fire and found, at the heart of stillness, a sanctuary that no storm can destroy. Have you ever discovered peace in being alone? If so, share your story in the comments so others can be inspired by your journey. If not, simply comment, "I will embrace solitude," and let's walk together into the strength that silence can bring. 2. Integration of the shadow. You stop hiding from your shadow when you begin to face the darker aspects of yourself. Your anger, your fear, your hunger for power, and instead of treating them as enemies to repress, you embrace them as teachers of the soul. Anger no longer has to erupt as destruction. It transforms into a sacred fire that fuels growth, boundaries, and the courage to stand tall in your truth. This fire, when directed with awareness, becomes energy that pushes you toward creating something meaningful. Whether it is protecting your well-being, pursuing your passion, or fighting for justice. Fear also shifts from being a paralyzing prison into a compass that reveals where your soul is asking you to grow. The trembling before speaking your truth or taking a leap is no longer proof of weakness, but an invitation to expand into authenticity, to honor the voice that has long been silenced. Authenticity, then, is born from balance. You are no longer split into fragments, the part of you that wants to please and the part of you that wants to roar, because you have allowed both to coexist within you. You can be gentle without being weak, powerful without being cruel, vulnerable without being helpless. This balance is the strength that comes from integration, the wholeness that allows you to walk through the world without hiding behind masks. It is the point where contradictions no longer tear you apart, but instead weave together into a deeper harmony that radiates truth. In a society obsessed with perfection, where people curate flawless images and hide their wounds behind screens, choosing to live with your shadow is the boldest act of spirituality. By saying, yes, I have anger, but I use it to protect my boundaries. Yes, I have fear, but it guides me to courage. You free yourself from shame and step into the profound honesty of spiritual awakening. This integration is not about escaping darkness, but about transforming it, not about suppressing contradictions, but holding them in your hands and letting them teach you strength. When you live in this way, your relationships deepen, your work aligns with your soul, and your very presence carries the magnetism of someone who is whole. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." By integrating your shadow, you refuse to be ruled by unconscious impulses, and instead begin to live by conscious choice. You take back your power from hidden patterns and allow your soul to lead with wisdom. This is the silent victory of your greatest battle. To walk through life not as a fragment, but as a whole being, carrying within you both light and shadow, yet standing firmly in the freedom of authenticity. Comment below. I embrace my shadow with wisdom. If you are ready to step into wholeness and live with true spiritual power. 3. Freedom from projection and drama. You begin to awaken to a higher truth when you free yourself from projection and drama, because you can finally recognize when others are not truly seeing you, but are casting their unresolved fears, insecurities, and pain onto you. Instead of absorbing their chaos and letting it shape your energy, you stand firm in clarity, knowing that their behavior reflects their inner battles, not your worth. This shift is a defining moment of spirituality and spiritual development, for it marks the day you stop carrying loads that never belonged to you. Boundaries, once fragile, now become strong and steady, not as walls to keep people out, but as shields that protect your peace while keeping your heart open. Compassion no longer drags you into codependency. It matures into presence, into the quiet strength of being there for others without losing yourself. You realize that you no longer need to rush into every storm to prove your love or sacrifice your energy to fix what was never yours to fix. When you stop making other people's emergencies your emergencies, you reclaim your time, your focus, and your inner harmony. This does not make you detached or unfeeling. Rather, it makes you wiser and more discerning, capable of offering genuine care without being consumed by someone else's fire. As Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And this freedom shows that you are becoming exactly that. Peace is not the absence of problems, but the mastery of response. And you are finally learning to master your own. In a world filled with constant demands emotional manipulation, and endless noise, this ability becomes a lifeline. Without boundaries, you would drown in the weight of expectations, but with them, you stand strong, steady, and unshaken. You begin to see that love is not about losing yourself to save others. It is about honoring your soul while still extending kindness. The true lesson here is that you are not responsible for solving every crisis or carrying every burden. Your first sacred duty is to guard your own spirit, to honor your journey, and to let others walk theirs. From this place, your compassion becomes more authentic because it no longer comes at the cost of your own well-being. The wisdom you carry now is clear. Not every battle belongs to you. Not every fire is yours to put out, and not every storm is meant to shake you. Knowing the difference is what allows your soul to rest in strength and clarity. This is the freedom that comes when you have survived your greatest battles. You become untouchable in your peace, unshaken in your truth, and unmovable in your love. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment below. Not sure what to say? Just write, "I am free," so I'll know you made it to the end. 4. Activated intuition and synchronicity. Your intuition has become more than just a quiet whisper. It has turned into your primary guide, sharper and more reliable than logic itself. You no longer depend solely on reason or the approval of others because you have learned to trust the deep intelligence of your inner voice. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." By surviving your soul's greatest battle, you have awakened, and with that awakening comes a new kind of spiritual wisdom that allows you to see what others cannot. You begin to recognize hidden motives, read subtle patterns in life, and sense the unspoken truths that shape people and events. This isn't imagination. It is the intelligence that emerges when your soul aligns with the collective unconscious, the great reservoir of knowledge and archetypes that binds all of humanity. Coincidences stop feeling random and start revealing themselves as synchronicities, meaningful connections that point you toward your path. You think of someone, and they appear. You change your route, and it leads you exactly to what you needed. Jung described this beautifully. Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. And now you see clearly. These moments of alignment reassure you that you are no longer stumbling in the dark, but moving in harmony with a greater order. Instead of making choices out of fear, pressure, or habit, you now decide based on resonance whether something feels right, whether it carries the quiet stamp of truth that only your inner self can recognize. Through this shift, your sense of intelligence expands. It is no longer confined to intellectual reasoning, but grows into emotional intelligence, spiritual wisdom, and intuitive knowing. Answers come to you not just from study, but from silence, reflection, and a deeper awareness of life itself. In difficult moments, you no longer panic. You listen, and guidance arrives. This is why those who endure such inner battles often become mentors, healers, or teachers. They embody wisdom that cannot be borrowed, only earned through fire and transformation. If you notice that you are guided more by intuition than by logic, that synchronicities unfold before you with perfect timing, and that you can sense meaning where others see only chaos, then you have stepped into a new way of being. You are not simply surviving anymore. You are living in conscious alignment with your true self, and with the deeper flow of existence. Jung reminded us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You have made the unconscious conscious, and by doing so, you have proven that your greatest struggle has become the foundation of your greatest wisdom. Stay connected with our spiritual wisdom community by subscribing to the channel. Here, we explore the power of intuition, synchronicity, and spiritual awakening to guide you on your journey of transformation. Remember, your inner wisdom is a gift. Trust it, and the universe will align in ways that Carl Jung himself would be proud of. 5. Embrace of life's cycles, death and rebirth. You accept endings not as final defeats, but as sacred preludes to renewal. Recognizing that what dies in your life, whether it be a relationship, a dream, or a season of self, becomes the fertile ground for something new to emerge. Carl Jung reminded us, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And in this truth, you understand that loss is not the opposite of life, but its catalyst, an invisible hand guiding you toward transformation. In the silence of grief and the stillness of letting go, you discover that each ending carries within it the seed of a greater beginning, teaching you that spirituality is not about clinging, but about trusting the flow of life's unseen wisdom. Growth then reveals itself not as a straight road, but as a spiral that returns you again and again to familiar lessons, each time with deeper insight and more refined strength. Spiritual awakening allows you to see that you are not failing when cycles repeat. You are simply revisiting old ground from a higher vantage point. Just as the seasons turn spring, bringing renewal, summer abundance, autumn release, and winter rest, your soul moves through phases that cannot be rushed or forced. To resist this rhythm is to suffer, but to honor it is to live in alignment with the intelligence of existence itself. Every setback becomes a passageway to growth. Every detour, a return to your truest self, reminding you that becoming whole is not linear, but cyclical. As this truth unfolds, you begin to conserve your energy and use it with wisdom, no longer scattering your focus on what drains or distracts you. Energy is the sacred currency of creation, and when guarded and directed with intention, it naturally fuels creativity. Instead of forcing inspiration, you realize that creativity is not something you chase, but something that flows through you when you are aligned with life's deeper rhythm. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And this becoming demands that you protect your vitality, nourish your spirit, and express yourself with clarity and courage. In a modern world of constant noise and endless stimulation, this conscious conservation of energy becomes not only a spiritual discipline, but also a form of survival, empowering you to create from authenticity rather than exhaustion. Thus, life itself becomes a dance of endings and beginnings, of release and renewal, where every cycle draws you closer to the essence of who you are. By embracing these cycles, you cultivate a profound trust in the wisdom of your own journey, knowing that every ending is a threshold, every silence a preparation, every loss a hidden gift. In this awareness, you do not resist the flow, but move with it, carrying the intelligence of spiritual wisdom into every choice, every act, and every breath. If you're still with us on this journey of death and rebirth, drop a comment below saying, "I embrace renewal." Your words help us grow and remind us that transformation is shared. 6. Release of the need for external validation. When the need for external validation dissolves, life takes on a new depth. Because comparison and inferiority complexes lose their grip, and you no longer measure your worth against the shifting opinions of others. As Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And in this state of awareness, you embody that wisdom by realizing that true value comes from within, not from applause or recognition. Self-worth begins to flow from inner authority, a grounded sense of knowing that is independent of praise or criticism, because both are seen as fleeting judgments that do not define who you are at the core. This shift is one of the clearest markers of spirituality and spiritual development, a sign that you have endured the battle of needing others' approval and emerged stronger on the other side. In today's culture, where social media thrives on likes, shares, and the endless cycle of comparison, the ability to stand firm in your authenticity is nothing less than a radical act of freedom. You understand that authenticity becomes non-negotiable because compromising your truth for validation would mean abandoning your essence, and no external reward can replace the peace that comes from staying aligned with your soul. In this stage, you are no longer swayed by flattery or wounded by criticism, for both lose their power over someone who has chosen to live in integrity with themselves. Praise may feel pleasant, and criticism may sting, but neither dictates your path or shakes your foundation, because you now recognize them as passing echoes that cannot touch the truth of who you are. The inner authority you have cultivated becomes a compass that keeps you steady, guiding you forward even when the world fails to understand or acknowledge your worth. This transformation often comes after years of silent battles, when you chose to honor your own voice even if it meant rejection, when you stayed true to your principles even if it cost you approval. These moments, though difficult, forged an unshakable strength. And now you walk with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs validation to confirm their worth. And paradoxically, it is this very independence that inspires others most. For your authenticity gives them permission to embrace their own. The message is clear. You are not here to be defined by society's applause or silence, but to live as a whole, an authentic being whose worth was never in question. By protecting your authenticity and anchoring your value in your own soul, you find a peace no external opinion can grant, and a confidence no one can take away. This is the essence of true spirituality, where freedom comes not from how others see you, but from how deeply you live in harmony with your own truth. 7. Energetic sovereignty and sacred boundaries. You begin to understand that your life force is the most precious treasure you carry, and you no longer let it leak into places that do not serve your growth. Instead of scattering your attention on every noise and demand, you guard it wisely, as if it were sacred fire. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." And this awakening makes you see that your energy is your true wealth. You no longer waste it on endless explanations or arguments, because you know that every drop of your vitality matters. You choose silence over struggle, clarity over chaos, and the more you do, the stronger your inner world becomes. In this awareness, relationships and commitments take on an entirely new meaning. You no longer cling out of fear of being alone or agree out of guilt, but you choose with discernment. Each person you allow close to you must respect your spirit, and each bond must support your growth rather than diminish your light. Jung reminded us that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And becoming who you truly are means walking away from what dishonors your soul. Saying no becomes an act of self-respect, and saying yes becomes a conscious step toward destiny. This is where spirituality and intelligence meet, guiding you to live with wisdom instead of impulse. Then suffering, once heavy and unbearable, transforms into a silent teacher. You recognize that pain was never a punishment, but a passage, shaping you into someone deeper, wiser, and more whole. Jung taught, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious, and you have walked through that darkness with courage. The wounds that once threatened to undo you have become the very ground where resilience blooms. Within you grows a stillness that cannot be faked, a wholeness that radiates beyond words. People feel it in your presence. They sense the calm, the unshakable center, the quiet power that comes only from surviving the soul's greatest battle. This is the essence of spiritual wisdom, the intelligence that carries you beyond survival into sovereignty. You no longer live as a victim of circumstance, but as a guardian of sacred energy. You embody the truth that boundaries are not walls, but doors to freedom, and that suffering is not an end, but a transformation. Every choice you make now reflects the mastery you have earned. You know your energy is everything, and you honor it by protecting it, by choosing love over fear, stillness over noise, wholeness over fragmentation. In this way, you live out Jung's timeless words. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. To honor your sacred boundaries and claim your energetic sovereignty, declare it now. Comment below, I stand in my power, to affirm your journey and encourage others to protect their own sacred space. And so, as you reflect on these 7 unmistakable signs, remember this: surviving your soul's greatest battle is not just about endurance, but about transformation. Each scar you carry within has become a symbol of strength, a silent testimony that Carl Jung himself would have recognized as the mark of individuation. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to continue walking this path of growth with us. Like this video, share it with someone who may need these words today, and don't forget to subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom and turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming explorations into spirituality, awakening, and the depths of the human soul. Until next time, may your spirit remain strong and your wisdom ever growing.